Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Glad you could join us again for another week of our Torah study. Start, as always, by taking our news, putting those thoughts to the side for the moment. I'm going to grab one of my kippot and put on this bigger one than usual. Hope you're all getting outside and enjoying the nice days that we have and staying inside and dry during the rainier days that we've been having. There we go. All right, cool. So, we're going to read again from our Hebrew Bible, as always, of course. We'll start off with our blessing. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. God commands us to read and engage in the words of Torah. And we have an exciting time right now. We are at the end of the book of Leviticus. We ended, when we started things, we were finishing up the book of Exodus. And now we've read through the whole of Leviticus, which is pretty great. So we're going to end the whole thing with a special, it's not even really a prayer, but kind of a special ritual. There we go. Anyway, so I'm going to read this, and it is God talking to Moses about the people and how they should treat the land periodically. The Lord spoke to Moses on Mount Sinai. Speak to the Israelite people and say to them, when you enter the land that I assign to you, the land shall observe a Sabbath of the Lord. 6 years you may sow your field, and 6 years you may prune your vineyards, and gather in the yield. But in the 7th year the land shall have a Sabbath of complete rest, a Sabbath of the Lord. You shall not sow your field or prune your vineyards. You shall not reap the aftergrowth of your harvest, or gather the grapes of your untrimmed vines. It shall be a year of complete rest for the land. But you may eat whatever the land during its Sabbath will produce. You, your slaves, your laborers who live with you, and your cattle and the beasts in your land may all eat the yield. You shall count off 7 weeks of years, 7 times 7, so that the period of 7 weeks of years gives you a total of 49 years. Then you shall sound the horn loud. In the 7th month, on the 10th day of the month, the Day of Atonement, you shall have the horn sounded throughout your land, and you shall hallow the 50th year. You shall proclaim release throughout the land for all its inhabitants. It shall be a jubilee for you. Each of you shall return to his holdings, and each of you shall return to his family. That 50th year shall be a jubilee for you, and you shall not sow, neither shall you reap the aftergrowth or your harvest and the untrimmed vines. For the jubilee, it shall be holy to you, and you may only eat the growth direct from the field. Okay, so we're all familiar, of course, with the idea of a Shabbat. That once every 7 days, there's a day of rest, a day of recuperation. You kind of do that however you want. We have these videos, and obviously everyone has their own. You have the some people keep a Shomer Shabbos where they don't use any electronics, and they study Torah and they do things like that. And there are some people like me who just make an effort from Friday night to Saturday night to just not do work, whatever that means for me, but I'll be on the computer, I'll be on the TV, and I'm sure that you fall somewhere in between that, maybe more on one side than the other. That's okay. Pardon me. Anyway, and so what we were reading was that that's supposed to happen to the land. That if, obviously we aren't farmers anymore, but back when the Israelites were farmers, the Torah says that they should every 7 years not be farmers in the land. Just live there and let the land recover, because if you work land too hard and too much, then you harm the soil, and that has long-term effects that are bad for the land. And for the people who are there, if the soil isn't as effective as usual, then you aren't able to grow the food that you need for your community. And then it says that after 7 cycles of those 7 years, that you have a whole big thing called a Jubilee, which is when the whole community kind of resets. And it says that people go back to where they came from and where their homes were. So if you had a home, or rather, if your parents had a home and they sold it, and you were then living somewhere else, after that 50-year cycle, that home gets returned to you because you're part of your parents' family, of course, even if you aren't living with them. And so it kind of lets the people of Israel trade their land, invest in their land, rent out their land without really giving everything up. It's a very peculiar thing. It doesn't really apply terribly well, I think, to nowadays. But it's a nice idea, of course, that we can get behind, that resetting things and giving people back kind of a basic amount, so that then the next generation, or at least every couple of generations, they get to restart things so that people don't kind of stack up generational wealth, which of course we see now causes problems in the world. But it also means that people can't, through poor investments, through poor decision making, just become broke and have no money. That those people should, or those families should have some way to recover. It's difficult to know really how to apply this to now, other than to say that the coronavirus and the quarantine has, of course, disrupted whatever plans we had. And while that's not the purpose of the quarantine, and it's a dangerous thing and we want to be safe, it does give us an opportunity to kind of reflect on our choices and say, okay, what are the things that I now know after, almost 2 months, over 2 months at this point, what are the things that I've now learned about myself that I really need? What are things that I want? What are things that I really miss about how things used to be? And what are things that I don't miss as much as I thought I would? For example, I like baseball. I've shown you this before, my baseball keeper. And I play a lot of fantasy baseball. And I find that I don't really miss the fantasy baseball all that much. But I do miss going to the games occasionally. So it's good for me to know that. And I'm sure that you have your own example of things that, if someone had said at the beginning of January, you have to give this stuff up, we'd obviously say, no, we don't want to, but now we've been forced to. But because we've been forced to, we can now reflect and say, okay, since we gave it up, what do we think about it? How do we feel? When we get back to the way things were, what are the things that we want to go back to doing? What are things that we don't want to go back to doing, we don't need to? And what are things that maybe we've discovered that we like, that maybe we didn't appreciate as much? Like, that's something to add to our daily life. All right. So, like I said, before we get to the Misha Berach, we're going to say a little ritual about finishing a book of Torah. You say chazak, chazak. It means from strength to strength, because reading Torah gives us strength, and reading Torah takes strength, and reading Torah builds strength. So, say chazak, chazak. And there we go. So, now we got our Misha Berach. So, if there's some choices that you're thinking about, or things that you miss from the old ways that you can't wait to get back to, or maybe stuff that you don't miss that you thought you might, you can think about those things. Or if you know anyone who is sick, is the primary purpose of this kind of the Misha Berach. I hope that you don't, but if you want to take this time to think about them. And here we go. All right. So, that's that for this week. Thank you for joining me. I hope to see you guys again next week. Chazak, chazak, and Shabbat Shalom.